Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muhiban Zaniab, our new panel show on Hidayat TV. We're bringing our second show to you. This is a show that's inspired by the revolutionary spirit of Lady Zainab Salamullah alayha. We're bringing you a very exciting show on interfaith dialogue and tolerance. Just a reminder, this is a live show, so if you do want to give any comments or ring in with any questions, please do so. And also, could you make sure you do them in English? I'd like to introduce our panelists to you. We have with us Johnny Weinberg. Johnny is a consultant for several voluntary community and faith organisations in the north of England. He's involved in many interfaith initiatives, particularly young people, and runs sessions for schools, youth and community groups in Judaism and its relationship with other faiths. He's also the former Deputy Principal Youth Officer for Manchester. He recently won the 2012 Community Cohesion Diversity Award as part of Manchester's Peace Week in recognition of his work across Manchester's diverse communities. He's the co-chairperson of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester, as well as the vice-chairperson of Faith Network for Manchester. Then we have Muhammad Amin. Muhammad Amin has on several occasions been listed as one of the 100 most influential Muslims in the UK. His background is that of a chartered accountant and tax advisor. Following retirement, he's involved in Islamic finance consulting and writing, and is also the co-chair of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. He's also the deputy chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, part of the Conservative Party. And last but not least, we have Sayyid Muhammad Musa Naqvi. Musa is a graduate of Economics and Management from Brasenose College, University of Oxford, and has a Master's in Economics as well as in Leadership and Public Policy from Manchester. He's a health economist and a public sector consultant. His published reports include disability, hate crime and sexual violence against women. He's also the former chairman of the Islamic Unity Society. He maintains a strong academic interest in women's rights and domestic violence issues. Okay, we were also due to have Reverend Bob Day on the show, but unfortunately he fell ill at the last moment, so he can't join us, and hopefully we pray that inshallah he has a swift recovery and we could invite him sometime in the future. So what I'll do is I'll explain the structure of the show very loosely. The first half an hour, the first half, will consist mostly, we'll discuss things like religious pluralism, tolerance, how religions can coexist harmoniously with each other. And then in the second half of the show, we'll discuss specific projects, practical things that we can do to put this forward, solutions that we can provide. Just a quick note, this is not a show to debate doctrinal differences or theological differences between various schools of thought. This is about putting differences aside and moving forward on common ground and see how we can make our society, our community, a better place to live in. Okay, so welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll start off with Musa. We'll discuss firstly what religious pluralism, what Islam has to say about religious pluralism. What is it?
Firstly, thank you very much, Munzila, for inviting me to speak here on Hidayat TV. I'm very grateful. I think if we look at the Quran and if we look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, the Holy Prophet of Islam, we find many examples of religious pluralism and tolerance. For example, verse number 13 of Surah Hujarat, herein is an image of a society which recognizes difference, which recognizes that people are of different origins, speak different languages, have different skin colors. The verse says, Ya ayyuhal insan inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban qaba'ila lita'arafu. So, interestingly, the verse translates to, O humanity, without doubt we have created you from male and female, and we have made you into various nations and tribe, so that you may get to know one another. Interestingly, the verse begins by addressing humanity. It does not begin by addressing believers as such. So it's presenting an image of a globalized world where people get to know one another. So the verse is saying لِتَعَارَفُوا. Indeed, it's encouraging people to get to know one another, to get to talk to each other, get to recognize that people are from different backgrounds, people are from different colors, have different colors. And if we look at this verse and then analyze the life of the Prophet, we will find that the Prophet is in a situation or living in a time where there are people who are from Arab origin, people who are from non-Arab origin, people who are black, people who are from Persia, and yet he does not see any difference between them. They're all equal in the eyes of God. This is what Islam has to say. And most poignantly for me, when Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam sends his representative of it, or his governor, Malik al-Ashtar, to govern over the people of Egypt, he tells Malik, the people are either your brothers in faith or your equals in humanity. أخٌ لك في الدين أو نذير لك في الخلق. So this is the spirit that Islam preaches about others, and this is the spirit that I personally would encourage every other Muslim to follow.
That's true. What does Judaism say regarding?
It's not that different, which is something that we tend to say quite a lot of when we meet with the Muslim Jewish Forum. But my favourite story in Judaism, I usually tell in terms of this very issue, and it's the man who goes to two rabbis, and he starts by going to Rabbi Shammai, and he asks Rabbi Shammai, tell me about Judaism while standing on one leg, give me the bottom line. And Shammai says, don't be so ridiculous, I can't do that, and chases him off with a builder's cubit. Why a builder's cubit? I don't know. But then he goes to Rabbi Hillel, who's very well known for being a great rabbi, but so kind. And he's asked him the same question, tell me all about Judaism while standing on one leg. And Hillel stands on one leg and said, do not unto others as you would not have them do to you. The rest is commentary, now go and study. And the point is very much so that it's all very well saying to somebody, oh, well, you're wrong, you've got to learn everything, I can't do everything on one line. But what Hillel does is he finds the right answer for that person. He's not asking himself, what's the right answer in Judaism? He's saying, what's the right answer for that person? And it's very much about treating every person as they come to you. And so Judaism is very much, and we call it the golden rule, it runs through every single religion. Whether we say love thy neighbour from Christianity or do not unto others, it's that thing about finding what's right for that other person, doing right by them, and empathy, putting yourselves in their shoes. We call that shituf betza'ar in Hebrew. And so it's very much that idea, and it does run through the face. And when we meet together and we talk together with other faith, exactly that same issue comes out. And it's more than just tolerance. It's actually wanting to understand where that other person is coming from and then trying to do the right thing by them.
What would you, what would you say to people who say we don't need to have interfaith dialogue? Our community is not harming you, we're not bothering you, and vice versa. What's the point? What would you say to skeptics like that?
The first thing I would say is that Islam didn't spread around the world because Muslims decided they were only going to talk to other Muslims. If you do that, by definition, nobody else ever gets to know anything about what you believe. Now, interfaith dialogue isn't about trying to convert other people. I'm no belief that I can convert Johnny to Islam or vice versa. But it is about being willing to share what you believe. And when you talk to other people about your religion, you learn more about it. I've learned an enormous amount about Islam since I got involved with the Muslim Jewish Forum, because if you're going to stand up in front of audiences and talk about Islam and answer questions, you need to know it.
Do you find being a youth worker as well, that at the age of the people you talk to, that has an effect on what you're saying?
Well, actually, we find that people right across the ages get involved, and whereas when we put on the right sort of events, we put on arts events often for International Women's Week, and we tend to get a younger group of women. But I mean, older women do get involved, and certainly, I suppose most of our participants are middle-aged. Yes. So we can say, but we do span those ages, and that's quite wonderful. So I don't think it so much matters what age somebody is. It's how they're coming into it and what they're looking to get out of it. And if they're willing to be open-minded enough to listen as well as to talk, then they're going to get somewhere.
Well, how best can we achieve tolerance? Because it's good to talk about it. We say all the time we need to learn how to get on with each other. What steps can we take? What are the we start off with you, Johnny. What would you say?
I mean, well, it's exactly what we do with the Muslim Jewish Forum. And with the Faith Network for Manchester. We give people opportunity to come together, to talk together, to understand each other with a whole variety of different ways. So we've had sports events, and I'd say arts events and women's events and youth events and food, that's always a good one. But any way that you can start to get people to understand more and to see people for who they are and not some sort of myth that's been created in the media or elsewhere. That's all that we really do. We do a lot of it. We always, when we come to write our annual report, we say how many events, and invariably it's more than one a month, because when you start to do this, and we've got a wonderful committee who do amazing things, and they're, we're about to have a big concert, right? Just because it's something we hadn't done, so we're going to do it, which is coming up in a couple of weeks' time at the Ukrainian Centre, so even more diverse. And that will have a Muslim group and a Jewish group playing the different types of music, and a real opportunity for people to come together in that atmosphere and again just enjoy being with each other. And like I said before, it goes beyond tolerance. It's wanting to really understand each other and really get along with each other.
I mean, you were mentioning before the show, how you started off with really small things rather than, could you tell us a little bit more about how you started?
Yes. I have lived in Manchester since I was 2 years old, and in my early 50s I had occasionally been to a church to attend a funeral when somebody Christian that I knew had died. I had never ever set foot inside a synagogue, despite the fact that Manchester has a large Jewish community. I had known Jewish people at school as friends, I had Jewish colleagues at work, I had Jewish clients, but I had never been to a synagogue. And to be honest, in my early 50s, I didn't actually have any real Jewish friends apart from work colleagues. And that's a sign of how easy it is to end up living parallel lives. And what you're doing in that situation is you're cutting yourself off from an enormous amount of opportunity to learn, opportunity to interact with different people, which will all be an enriching experience. When we set up the Muslim Jewish Forum, we initially set it up because there are lots of things that Muslims and Jews want to campaign for and defend together. Halal food, Jewish slaughter, Muslim slaughter, circumcision, rules about post-mortems. So very practical things. But as we got going, we went beyond that and gradually simply started to get to know each other better. Now, we didn't set out to change the whole world. We set out to improve contacts between Muslims and Jews in Greater Manchester. And we started off from the basics. We had a visit to a mosque. There were lots of Jews who had never set foot inside a mosque. They went, they sat at the back, they watched people praying. We went to a synagogue, and this was my first experience of attending a synagogue, attending the Jewish prayers. And one of the things you find as a Muslim when you go to a synagogue is actually a much easier experience than going to a church. Because when I go to a church and we're singing hymns, at times I just sort of keep quiet. I don't join in with the words, because these are words about Jesus, the Son of God, for example, that I can't join in with. When I go to a synagogue, I don't have that problem. You go through a Jewish prayer book, and I recommend doing it at some time, and just read the words and ask yourself, as a Muslim, do I have any problem with these words? And the answer is, I don't.
That's quite powerful, isn't it? Musa, what kind of challenges would we face in the pursuit of harmonious coexistence, do you think?
I think Johnny kind of hit the nail on the head, if I may say so, when he was talking about empathy and thereof lack. So I think a challenge would be to develop empathy, to put yourself in the feet of the other, to realize what they might be going through in their situation. And that can only happen through developing an understanding, through liaising, through talking, through visiting. And the biggest challenge would be that change in mindset of wanting to do it, as opposed to just living in your own cocoon, in your own bubble. With that change of mindset will come the practical steps on how you may go about achieving this harmonious coexistence. There'll of course be external influences, for example global events, things that come up in the media, things that are sometimes blown out of proportion and taken out of context. The way we preach within our mosques and within our centres, and what we preach and who we preach to. and schools, the number of interactions that youth have. I suppose probably at schools is where the kids of different faiths are probably meeting each other the most. That might actually be a good way of getting to know other faiths. Might be a solution to that challenge in a way. But I think it's to do with the mindset. It's to do with developing that mindset to say, actually, we want to live in a state of coexistence. Because if you don't want it, it'll never happen.
Does that mean that we are more, as individuals, we're more selfish now? We're less altruistic? We don't get involved in social welfare? All religions have this common base of making sure that the less fortunate in your community, and not even within your community, are okay. But does it follow that we are more selfish now, do you think?
I don't see that, mainly because in my day-to-day work I'm working with charities and voluntary organisations, and so what I see, I'm very fortunate, is very much the best of people. For example, I mean, over the last couple of years we've seen the growth of food banks, more people in need, and people have responded, people have set them up, people have done more. We have, from the Faith Net for Manchester, we have the Nano Food Bank within Manchester, liaising, and as a Muslim Jewish forum we've collected food outside Tesco, people have donated, and then we've donated it to 2 Christian-based charities, which is a very nice thing to do as well. And so you do see all of that very good, but there is a selfishness. Some people may say it came in the 80s, that greedy society. And yes, there are people who will continue to think of themselves before others. But as we've said, if it's that empathy thing where you can look about the other and say, I want to do something for somebody else, if that's the spirit you go in with, then we can see good things can happen.
Can I comment on this? It's often easy to think that people are becoming more selfish. The reality is that there are regular attitude surveys done, which have been done for decades, and they show that people today, especially young people, are more public spirited, care more about others, care more about the third world, for example, than people did 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And if you look at the way that people are willing to give to charity, I think I still wish people would give more to charity, but actually charitable giving in this country has been rising as time has gone by. It's easy to believe that things are always getting worse. They're not, they're getting better, and levels of tolerance and acceptance of others, again, is actually improving rather than getting worse. I'm old enough to remember the racism of the 1950s, and I get very angry when I hear young people today say, this racism is terrible and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And that is complete rubbish. Racism in our society has been declining steadily over the decades. And I've got 5 decades worth of personal experience. 6, I'm 63 now.
That's true. What place does faith have in today's society? What good effect can it have? Also, if I ask you in terms of helping the community around us.
I think, again, if you turn towards Islam, and if I speak from an Islamic perspective, Islam is a faith that encourages you to do good. It encourages you to help your fellow human beings. And if you look at the example of the Holy Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his example, all Muslims find excellence, all humanity finds excellence, and no faith ever, I won't put it exclusively to Islam actually, I would say no faith encourages anyone to do bad.
Yeah.
So every single faith encourages people to do good and to progress as a society, to be tolerant. So I guess if you look at your social problems, and there's numerous of them that exist, you will find that faith has given the solution to all those problems way in advance. And I think this is about having the courage and having the right mindset of actually taking those examples, taking those theories, and just relentlessly applying them.
And it's happening in practice, because if you go back to the start of last century, when there wasn't this huge welfare state that we have now, which were the organisations doing things in this country? It was the churches.
It was the churches,
the social welfare,
absolutely.
the sort of youth groups with the lads brigade and so on. That came through churches, and the Jewish community was very much part of that. And it's happened throughout. And now that times are becoming hard, the statutory agencies are looking again to those very same groups to step up and to fill that gap, and the groups are stepping up. So faith has a massive role to play, and there was research done, which, Faith in the Northwest, Faith in England, which shows the massive contribution of voluntarism. When you put a value on it, it's millions and millions of pounds worth of volunteering that come from faith groups.
And it comes from all faith groups.
Absolutely.
Every faith group, Muslims, things like Islamic Relief set up by Dr. Hani al-Banna, enormous amounts of charitable giving. The Jewish community has always been extremely generous. The Sikh community, the Hindu community.
Yes, well, we're a bit over the top because we've got over 400 different voluntary organisations for the Jewish community of less than 30,000 people in Greater Manchester, and when you work it out, that's one for every 75 people. That's slightly too many, possibly, but you see the growth, and I'm privileged to work with Hindu communities, Sikh communities, and you see the growth of those sorts of organisations, and certainly the Muslim community, which has almost doubled in size in Manchester over the last decade, and again, all of those institutions starting to grow, and as new communities come in, they set up their own institutions again to support people, and virtually all of them are willing not only to support people of their own creed but of others as well, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's true. It seems like a good time to mention the Muslim Jewish Forum now and how it was born. Would you like to give a bit of just an insight on how it came about?
Yes, back 2004 I got a letter out of the blue from Manchester Town Hall, sent by Afzal Khan, who was then the Deputy Lord Mayor, who I knew personally, and that's why I just got the letter, inviting people to a public meeting where two chaps from London, Rabbi Herschel Gluck, who, if you ever see him photographed, looks just like you would imagine a rabbi. He's got a long white beard, black hat, the works, and a chap called, much younger chap called Ismail Amin, who's no relation to me. And they were coming here at Afzal Khan's request, along with a Jewish guy, Henry Gutterman, who was a previous president of the Jewish Representative Council, to talk to this public meeting about what they had been doing in North London about Muslim-Jewish dialogue. And the audience went away quite enthused. About a month or so later, I got another letter saying, come to public meeting to talk about whether we should set up some kind of forum in Manchester. So I went to that meeting, and there was overwhelming support at the meeting to set up something. So you then get a steering group of volunteers, and being an accountant, I volunteered, and a Jewish barrister called David Barclay was one of the volunteers, and he and I were given the job of drafting a constitution. And when you get a QC and a partner at Price Waterhouse doing a constitution, you get a constitution in spades. So we are a company limited by guarantee, registered at Companies House, which may be a bit over the top, but it works, and we have proper sort of legal form, and we were incorporated in June of 2005, so we've been going now for about 8 years.
That's great. And some of the projects, if you tell us some of the main projects, the most successful projects that you've had, maybe John, you could actually chip in as well. Yeah.
Well, we started off really small by visiting a synagogue, visiting a mosque, having Eid meals, having Hanukkah meals. We've entered teams in the Jewish Rep Council quiz. We've had trips to the Holocaust Centre. We've had this International Women's Week where we've had a grant from Manchester City Council to organise art events for Jewish and Muslim women. Women of all faiths. We
had a competition at one point for young people to either write an essay or do a media presentation on what Judaism and Islam have to say about world peace. We got some wonderful entrants. And again, we've had the sports events, so we've had football, and the first football event, which was shortly after Henry Gutterman had passed away. So it was in his honour. And instead of it being the Jewish young people against Muslim young people, we mixed the teams up, and that was a wonderful thing to do. And we've done that, and we hope to do it again. We've had cricket matches. For me, being very involved in Jewish cricket is always a wonderful thing. We don't need to do that anymore because my Salford Jewish Cricket Club, which I'm part of, we play in the Greater Manchester Amateur Cricket League, and I think about half the teams we play are Muslim teams. So, I mean, and when you say, where's the most engagement, I actually think there's more engagement on a cricket pitch than any other forum, except maybe Tesco in Cheetham Hill.
We've had food collection events at the Tesco.
Yep.
We've had...
there are other supermarkets.
And I've lost the thread. I was but the business networking events. We had a whole series of business networking events where people who were in business, Jewish, Muslim and indeed others have come along to talk about what they do, while stallholders have turned up to basically market their businesses.
And then in partnership with the Faith Net for Manchester, which is easy for me to partner with, but also with the Hindu Jewish Association and with the Christian Muslim Forum, we do a thing called In Your Faith. So this is about trying to much better get good people going into schools and during curriculum hours do work around more understanding about the various faiths. And the measure is how that positive view of other faiths, and we evaluate. And the really interesting thing is we ask them after, how positive were you of other faiths before the session, how positive now? And we find this wonderful bump that 2/3 who weren't positive before are then positive afterwards. And that's a huge impact in a very short amount of time. And I think the reason is because we go in and enthuse. And they see Jews and Muslims together, and they see us talking positively about each other, and all the nonsense and the myths go because we celebrate where each other are coming from.
All kinds of other offshoots as well. So David Barclay and I have spoken together probably 9 or 10 times now before Jewish audiences on different aspects of Muslim-Jewish dialogue, religion, attitudes to conversion.
Yeah, we just have a call, so we'll take that now. Assalamu alaikum. Hello? Assalamu alaikum, hello?
Hello, alaikum salam. I've got a couple of questions, if I can ask them.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, 2 questions. First one is, what's the opinion of the non-Muslims when they read about Moses and Jesus, peace be upon him, mentioned in the Quran? And what's the opinion of the Muslims about how they think there could be more unification within the Muslims? So there's the 2 questions: unification in Islam and the opinion of the non-Muslims regarding Jesus and Moses, peace be upon them, being in the Quran. What's their interpretation of that?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. 2 very good questions. We could ask you that, Johnny. The first question was, what's the non-Muslim opinion about the mention of Moses in the Quran, because he's mentioned as a prophet?
Well, interestingly, the only religion that Judaism recognises as a true religion is Islam. Because when you read the Torah and you read the story, Abraham had 2 sons. He had Isaac and Ishmael, and God said to Ishmael, "You shall be the leader of a great nation," and Islam is that great nation. So there is that recognition there. So the fact that Moshe is mentioned in the Quran is absolutely no surprise. Jesus, we have a couple more problems with. Good Jewish boy, but maybe went slightly awry from our perspective. Having said that, indeed, I work very closely with a lot of Christians and very respectful. And for me, it's not so much about the theology. I'm no theologian. It's about what people do practically. And if what you're doing is good works and being righteous and looking to help others, then that's positive regardless of the faith. So I'm not overly worried about the text, I'm more worried about what people do.
Well, for example, Maimonides, the great Jewish scholar, great rabbi, he said that it is okay for Jews to go inside a mosque, because in a mosque there are no statues, there are no idolatrous symbols, etc. But he believed that Jews should not go into churches because of all the idolatrous symbols, the representations of Jesus, etc., that you find in churches. Islam and Judaism are much closer to each other than any other 2 religions I can think of.
That's fascinating, actually. The second question is regarding unification within Islam, so various denominations. How would you go about sort of answering that? Musa, if we start with you.
Yeah, I think, obviously I come from a Shia perspective, but I have the greatest of respect for my brothers from a Sunni background, and I think we have so much in common. I think 90% of the things that are in Islam are shared by all. We believe in the same God, we believe in the same Prophet, we believe in the same book, we all pray, and I think if we focus on those, if we build on those, that's the way forward. And where there are differences of opinion, those can be dealt with in a healthy and academic way. And it's about recognizing the fact that actually there is a difference, but it doesn't mean that you take that difference and you exaggerate it in a particular way which has consequences otherwise, sometimes violently.
That's true. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes, in my view, the idea of unifying Muslims is actually an illusion, because it implies that somehow you can make all Muslims believe exactly the same thing, which is just never going to happen any more than you can make all economists believe the same thing, or all Jews believe in Judaism exactly the same way. What is important is that we recognize that everybody is entitled to believe and practice as they want to believe and practice. That doesn't stop you collaborating. It doesn't stop you remembering that we live in one city together, we live in one country together. It's like people being on a boat. If people are on a boat, they need to cooperate, because if they don't, the boat will sink. And it's exactly the same with Muslims or with citizens of Britain as a whole.
But you also need people to do different things.
Yeah.
And that's the wonderful thing about diversity, because it makes life interesting. It means you actually get more things done because people are good at certain things. So you don't worry about difference. What you worry about is similarity and finding how you can work together and celebrate it. I celebrate difference, I celebrate similarity. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And say in Islam you have Shia, Sunni, Sufi. In Judaism we have Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and then we have a whole, we have Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and lots of others. But we're actually not too bad when you consider that Christians have about 3,000 denominations. So, but that diversity is wonderful, and we should celebrate those differences as long as what people are bringing is that positivity towards each other.
My idea of a nightmare is to live in a Britain where we've got 60 million people all identical to me in every single way, because I'm insufferable and I don't have to put up with myself because I never meet another Muhammad Amin.
That's really good. Well put. Before we were talking about some of the projects that the Muslim Jewish Forum was, and I cut you off, I'm sorry about that. You were mentioning some of the projects beforehand.
You haven't mentioned our lawyers and accountants, which you've been very involved in.
Yes, because I mentioned the business networking before. We also have a lawyers and accountants group, which is actually open to everybody. It's just that it gives us a kind of focus, and it's gradually morphed into mostly lawyers. But we had a really good event called Loose Lawyers, which we've run twice now, where we get a panel of 4 lawyers and a chairman. They talk for a little while, and then they take questions from the floor on all kinds of legal issues. And it's very well attended. It's supported by a firm of lawyers who basically pay for the food and provide the venue as a bit of marketing. But it is really a very well attended, enjoyable event.
That's great. Have you faced any challenges in the setup of the forum? Any glitches, any problems?
The biggest challenges we've faced have been from the outside world. So we got started in sort of 2005. And mostly Jewish, reasonable amount of Muslim attendance was growing, and then in the summer of 2006 we had the Second Lebanon War with Hezbollah and Israel, and Muslim attendance went right down, and then after that was over it gradually started building back up again. At the end of 2008 we had Operation Cast Lead, and exactly the same thing happened. The Muslim attendance plummeted and then has rebuilt. So whenever something goes seriously wrong in the Middle East between Muslims and Jews, we do tend to suffer in terms of attendance and support at our events. But eventually things build back up again. We are local. We don't exist to talk about Israel and Palestine.
Although we have done. And then I think it was about 5 years in.
Yeah. After Cast Lead.
Yeah, and we decided that we'd built up a good enough relationship to actually do something. We've had a couple of events. One was a quite controlled facilitated listening event. Yeah. The other one I thought was much more interesting. We'd had some of the people involved. Indeed, Reverend Day, along with Rabbi Warren Elf, had gone as part of a FODIP, which is a forum for discussion on Israel and Palestine, and they'd gone on this trip to Israel.
I went on it myself.
Oh, there you go. I should have realised that. And they came back and they presented their experiences. And we had about 70 people from both faiths. A very interesting discussion at the cathedral, not in the main hall, but in a meeting room. And people coming out said that was the first civilised discussion we've ever had on Israel-Palestine. And that's really interesting. And I think we've got to the point where we can have those civilised discussions, where we can talk about a very difficult issue in a different way than attacking each other. Because again, we come from the point about where can we find some common ground.
And you've got to be smart. David Barclay suggested that once we should talk at Limud about Jerusalem and Muslim and Jewish attitudes towards Jerusalem. And I said to him straight away, David, that's a great idea, but I'm not going to go with you in front of a Jewish audience, mostly Jewish audience, and say, effectively, my claim to Jerusalem is better than yours. So what we're going to do is that I will talk about the Jewish connection with Jerusalem, and you will talk about the Muslim connection with Jerusalem. And he gulped, because it meant he'd have to do a bit of learning and research, but he agreed. And we've done that talk about 3 or 4 times because it's been so well received. And I talk about the deep historical Jewish connection with Jerusalem, which I really feel quite strongly at an emotional level. And he talks about the very strong Muslim connection with Jerusalem, because and he starts off by giving some quotes from an American anti-Muslim bigot, who I won't bother naming, who tries to pretend that there is no Muslim connection with Jerusalem. And then he goes on, David Barclay goes on to explain, using verses from the Quran and other things, about how strong the Muslim connection with Jerusalem actually is. But that's the point. You've got a Jew talking about the Muslim connection with Jerusalem and a Muslim talking about the Jewish connection with Jerusalem.
I think that's wonderful, actually. That's really nice. We just have a call. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, assalamu alaikum. Hello? Assalamu alaikum. Hello? Do you want to ask your question? Okay, I think we've lost that call. So what role should politics play in interfaith dialogue, if any? Should we start with you, Musa? What do you think? Just talked a bit about it.
That's a difficult one.
Because we can see in controlled conditions it does help, but, you know.
There's a verse in the Quran, verse number 48 of Surah Ma'idah, which says that if God so willed, He would have made you a single people, i.e. everyone would be the same. And the verse goes on and continues, and it talks about the fact that the difference that you have is a test for you to see how good you really are. And I think if we went into that sort of discussion with the spirit that, okay, there is the greater good out there, God has made you for a reason, and He's made you different for a reason. And let's not let that difference, or let that politics, or that external events that are taking place elsewhere dominate what's happening here right now. I think then we may have a way forward, as opposed to letting the issue of somewhere else dictate what happens here and now.
Okay. We have a call again. Assalamu alaikum. Hello? Oh, I think that's got dropped again. Bad luck.
Just to pick up this point about politics, I love politics, but I've never been a member of a political party. Because I really dislike party politics, because I think it tries to fit everybody into one little box instead of recognising that people have lots of diverse opinion, and they often talk about all different political parties being a broad church, which is an interesting phrase that they use, a nice faith phrase. But for me, getting young people to understand politics and look at all the different issues, and every single religion actually talks about all these issues. That's what religion comes from. It has wonderful things to say. Pick an issue about health or education. This is where religions come from. This is what we talk about all the time. So of course we should talk about them. And both of us being involved in youth work, we know this. And allowing young people to have that space to talk and to explore these issues, and then look at what their faith principles are that they bring to that as well. That's a wonderful thing.
Sorry, I think we have another call. Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Program.
Hello.
Hello?
Hi, yes. Do you want to ask your question?
Pardon?
Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I'm Heather. I'm the secretary of the Muslim Jewish Forum.
Okay. Hi. Hello.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Heather.
Yes. Hi, Heather.
Hello?
Hi, Heather. We can hear you. Do you want to ask your question? You're live now.
Yes, I'm Heather, the secretary of the Muslim Jewish Forum.
Yep.
I hope they've talked about me.
Yeah, but Heather, if you're on the phoning in, you're supposed to ask a question.
I think she might be listening from the TV.
Okay. Do you want, if you turn your TV, just mute it, then you can ask, otherwise there's a delay.
Just before Heather, I said just to say, I mean, both of us know Heather very well because she's our secretary. Yeah. She is the most hard-working, amazing person, and we wouldn't do half the things that we do without Heather. She is quite incredible. So the fact she's come on, quite right that Heather should come on.
Are you still there, Heather?
It's now been said on live TV, so...
It's now been said. Okay, well that's fine, we've got it on the record.
But you were asking earlier about politics.
Yes.
We actually don't do politics inside the inside the Muslim Jewish Forum because we're a non-political organisation, but we do a certain amount of political leg pulling. So, for example, Heather is an active member of the Labour Party. She goes to the Labour Party conference. I'm an active Conservative. I go to the Conservative Party conference. So we're always pulling each other's leg about David Cameron or Ed Miliband. But we don't do real politics.
Hi, hello, assalamu alaikum, are you there? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, assalamu alaikum, can you hear me? Is that Heather?
It is.
Okay, right, sorry, we can hear you now, Heather, go ahead.
Yes, what I'd like to say is that generally a lot of the people we have coming along, and we have expanded a lot, but they're still mainly middle-aged people. It's harder to get younger people involved.
Yeah, that's really...
And I think what we do is we don't necessarily look for young people to come to events, although they do come to some. It's that going out to see where young people are, and I think that's always important when you work with young people, and that's why we're going to schools and youth groups, and we've had some excellent engagement with young people and through the sporting events as well. It's doing the right thing for a different group, and it's not just for ourselves. It's actually the case that young people aren't so much going to youth groups anymore at all. They're looking for different ways to engage. We do have active involvement in different ways, certainly through social media now.
Yeah. We have another call. Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Oh, hello. Yes, it's Guy Olson here. I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
But I can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my question is that you, that's Johnny and the others, have pioneered multi-faith dialogue, which is brilliant. I'm coming from a humanist and atheist point of view, and would like to ask the panel whether they see a purpose or a role for dialogue between those of faith and atheists and humanists.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. The role of yep, that's an excellent question. Thank you so much.
The dialogues that we've done, we had funding for a time. We actually did monthly dialogues, which was very challenging. Every month to come up with a new topic, and it was Faith Says on a whole range of different issues. So Faith Says on gender, on sexuality, on disability, on refugees, on a whole range of issues. And it was really interesting. We always advertise those as being open to those of faith and of no faith. And that's always an important thing. So I know Guy, and he's absolutely right, that opening those doors to talk to everybody is incredibly important. We should never exclude. In terms of a faith network, the only exclusion that we make is that because we are a faith network for Manchester, the people on our committees are people of faith. Apart from that, everybody's welcome. And indeed with the Muslim Jewish Forum, I've got a feeling, and you'll know better than me, that the company, when it's set up, actually doesn't exclude other people being involved at all.
Anybody can join the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. You don't have to be Muslim, you don't have to be Jewish.
Yeah, that's really good. Musa, if I could ask you, what is the role of, how can we improve our dialogue with?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just from the perspective of Islam, and looking again, I keep going back to it, looking again at the life of the Prophet, I think you will find a human being who's lived among people who are not of the same faith as him. He lived for 40 years, and yet those very same people called him the person with the most excellent of morals. He was the Sadiq, he was the Amin. And the Quran openly embraces dialogue between people who do not believe in God. It doesn't say that you shouldn't talk to them, it doesn't say you shouldn't welcome them. It recognizes that, each to their own. It recognizes the fact that people are different. For example, lakum dinakum waliyadin, your faith to you and my faith to me. It doesn't impose in that sense. And if we look at the life of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the sixth Imam within the Shia school of thought, again, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam's personality is one in which he regularly communicated, regularly talked with people who were coming from a perspective in which they did not believe in the existence of an almighty being. So as a Shia Muslim, if I take the example of the Prophet, and if I take the example of Imam Sadiq, I would actively go and talk to people who are of no faith in terms of they don't believe in the existence of God. And if we extend that example from just merely talking, and if we look at the actions of the Prophet, and if we look at the actions of Imam Sadiq, they wouldn't withhold charity from someone who was in need just because they didn't believe in God. And that's the spirit that we really need to have, and that we really need to embrace within the work that we do.
And humanists come with a respect for faith, and that's quite important. That even though they say we don't believe in God, as human beings, we are good human beings, we want to do good, and that's important, because there's a difference between that and some secularists who say that we should not have faith having any influence in our society. And as we've already said, a lot of those institutions in terms of social welfare, youth and so on, have come about because of faith. And secularists attacking faith, I think, is a worrying thing. But humanists, and again, we're about to start a humanist inspired dialogue group, I believe, at the Multi-Faith Centre. I wish I knew more, I really should. But I know that there's something coming. I think Guy might be involved in that. So
it's a book club.
Is it? Oh, there you go.
It's a humanist Muslim book club.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But it's going to be able to all
And the
faiths.
first book they're discussing in January is one by Kezra Shiraz, the Holy Woman, I think.
And Kezra is a member of both committees in terms of Faith Network and Muslim Jewish Forum.
Very active novelist.
Very appropriate that that's the first book they're going to discuss.
Wow. Well, just going back to Heather's point about not having as many youth involved, Musa, having worked with a youth organisation, what would you say? What are the...
Yeah, I as a representative of a youth organisation, as a young person myself, I'm not that old, I would say that the youth in my community, the Shia community, are probably the most active in any segment of any age group. The youth are probably the most active in wanting to have dialogue, in wanting to get involved, in wanting to get to know one another. Just a few examples. Recently a youth group went to a church. They had a dialogue at the church on the birthday of Jesus. I know, according to Muslim traditions, the birthday of Jesus is around Easter time. Again, we invited a person from a church to come and talk to us, and the talk was entitled The Arrival of Jesus, and we had a discussion about what Jesus means to us as Muslims and to our brothers in the Christian faith. We had a discussion about Mary, because these are all figures which are common to Christianity and Islam. More than that, a Jewish group and the IUS, the Islamic Unity Society, we recently met and we discussed what spirituality meant to each of our faiths. So there's a lot going on at a youth front. I'm not sure if it's well known or if it's well publicized. That's a different thing. I guess the big thing is sports, which gets the youth involved and gets them interesting, and it's like a hook.
We're looking at the spring to have another one of our football events, so that'll hopefully happen. But Interfaith Week, which is coming up next month, we're going to try and relaunch Faith Youth Manchester, and that should be quite interesting. Faith Youth Manchester, we did have a couple of really positive events with young people coming along. We had a wonderful event at the Manchester Convention Centre, the old UMIST site, where young people came and made T-shirts and made banners and did a piece of drama together. Very exciting event. And we followed that up with a sports event. And again, you had a lot of young people coming together from different faiths. And again, just finding out about each other, just as we do with the forum and in the dialogues. The idea is to give them the opportunity to do exactly that again, and if they looked at the FM4M website, which is fn4m.org, they can find out about that. Get involved. For young people, it's the opportunity, and again, all over Facebook, I'm sure they'll find it if they want to.
Do you do also, literature? I would find that quite useful, sort of fact sheets to do with Judaism and Islam. Is that something you also
We don't have literature as such. We do have a website which tells you about events that we've had and events that we're going to have, muslimjewish.org.uk. But literature, there is so much existing literature out there. Maybe we should put some more links on.
We have with the Multi-Faith Centre, we now have a resource centre there with a whole range of resources that people can use. We do have things in the offing in terms of what we'll have for young people. So we will have a card game which will look at 9 different faiths and look at all those different things, whether it be the symbols they use, some of the stories, some of the history, where they worship. So we've got that, and we're going to have a display for that as well. So a lot of these things are developing, but maybe a fact sheet wouldn't be a bad idea for the Muslim Jewish Forum. That's a nice idea.
Just for all faiths, actually, because we kind of find that we build our information on stereotypes, what you find on TV. So just some kind of quick dispellers.
Well, I'm a great believer in sticking to what it says on the tin. So it is the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. So you may do some fact sheets about Islam and Judaism, but I can't see anything more. Faith Network for Manchester.
Well, what about the Multi-Faith Centre? I mean, when was that formed, actually? That would be good to talk about that.
Faith Network for Manchester was formed around the same time as the Muslim Jewish Forum, and again, one of the leading figures in getting that together was the late Henry Gutterman, and in fact the Multi-Faith Centre, which we set up around a year ago, is dedicated to his memory. He was known in the Jewish community as Mr. Interfaith. When he passed away, we decided to have a lecture event, and I was given the task of linking with all the different groups he'd been involved with. When I'd got to 20 different groups, we thought we'd got enough, and that was a partnership that put together a lecture with Lord Janner, who came up, and 200 people turned up from all over the country. So it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, we've done the Multi-Faith Centre, which is there. It's open to anybody to use. It's in the middle of Manchester, and people are running their events there. We have our own projects that we're doing. I mentioned In Your Faith, we're doing peace mollers, which are the little bracelets that people wear, which people put together. A whole range of other projects in the offing. And again, I hope from what people have heard, they will want to be involved, because it's a very exciting thing to be involved with. It takes you slightly out of your comfort zone. And if you like that, if you like a challenge, get involved with the Muslim Jewish Forum, with the Faith Network, or any other organisation, and there are 17 different interfaith organisations around Greater Manchester and many more across the country that people can get involved with.
That's a really good summary, actually. We've just got a couple of minutes left. If we could just get some final thoughts. I mean, if I start off with you, what would you like people to take away from this programme?
I think the single strongest takeaway that I would give is that if you get involved in talking to people of other religions, you will learn more about your own religion.
When I go along to talk to youth groups, I do lots of different things, but one thing I like to say near the end is that I've got a challenge for them. And the challenge is this: as a Jewish person, I can challenge anti-Semitism, but the real challenge for me is when somebody says something anti-Muslim, I can challenge that Islamophobia. So for a group of Muslims, I'll challenge them and I'll say, so for you, fine, challenge Islamophobia, you're absolutely right, but the real challenge is when somebody's anti-Semitic, that you stand up and say, not on my watch. And I hope that people hear that and say, you know what, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to look to build those bridges. I'm going to look to do something myself. Because every person who decides to do that starts to solve some of the problems that we've got in the world.
That's true.
I'd again just go back to what I started with, really. The life of the Prophet, the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam. Because as a Muslim, those two people are the most revered by us, and if we just listen to what they have to say, listen to what they preach, follow what they preach, because if you look at the Prophet, he was a person who was tolerant, he was a person who was kind, he was a person who always had a smile on his face, he was a person who greeted people, he was gentle, he was positive about humanity and what humanity could achieve. Ali ibn Abi Talib, similarly, when he said to Malik al-Ashtar, أَخٌ لَكَ فِي الدِّينِ أَوْ نَظِيرٌ لَكَ فِي الْخَلْقِ, a person is either your brother in faith or your equal in humanity. And I think if we live that, if we respected that value that Ali ibn Abi Talib is trying to tell us, then I think we have a long way to go as brothers in humanity.
I think that's a really wonderful summary, actually. There's not really much left for me to say, except I wanted to end on a quote by Desmond Tutu. "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together." That's all we have time for today. Join us again in a couple of weeks' time in Muharram, when we have another edition of Muhiban is Zainab, where we look at the journey of Imam Hussein and Lady Zainab Salamullah alayha, from Mecca to Medina and on to Karbala and then Damascus. It's been wonderful to have you with us. Join us again next time, and hopefully with a new topic, new panelist. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.